Having arrived, Finance Committee for Wednesday, October 20th, 2021 to order. The first item on our budget tonight is budget deliberations for 2022. This is the second in a series of workshops where we will actually develop and distill down the budget for next year. There's two more. There's another session tomorrow and a session next Tuesday. And so with that, where we left off, we had a PowerPoint presentation in our last session where we looked at some of the revenue and expense trends within our budget. We looked a little bit at our cost to continue and some adjustments that had already been made prior to the budget getting to us, or the proposal getting to us. And so with that, I think I'm going to turn over to Mary Ann and have her walk us through the start of this process.
Okay, I think when we met last, we said that today we would kind of dive a little bit further into the capital budget and some of our capital planning. And one of the key points to that is really the transit levy and some of our transit planning. Oh, Tony's here now. Tony, do you want to do your spiel first? Sure, if you want to.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit then, because we do have people that may follow us also from home. Because the HR director has arrived, we're going to shift the agenda, if there's not opposition from within the committee, to take item number 2 first, which is discussion and possible action approving recruitment and retention incentives. You'll recall a few meetings ago, we had talked about the fact that the city in recent years has struggled with this, both maintaining people in positions and attracting new employees. And we requested that the HR committee would consider some options and make us some recommendations as to how we can start to address some of that struggle. So we have the HR director with us today, and in your packets are the minutes from the HR committee where she had laid out a few options. So welcome, Tony.
Welcome. Thank you for having me to talk about this exciting topic. I did go through a rather lengthy presentation for HR committee and also for the Water Commission. So if you guys are okay with it, I think I might bottom line it for this group, which is that I will focus on the recommendations that came forward.
Sure.
We have two different types of recommendations, things that we're going to try to do immediately in this budget year, and things that will need to be considered in next year's budget because they're more expensive. The things that the HR committee approved for us to do immediately are to temporarily suspend usage of steps 1 and 2. Any employees who are currently on these pay steps would be moved to step 3, and future recruitments would start at step 3. That costs about $16,000 to implement. So I was hopeful that that amount was enough that we could find through a modification of our existing budget. The other items that we're doing immediately are adjusting the vacation policy so that new hires can borrow up to a week of vacation in their first 6 months instead of having to wait for that time to accrue. This will allow people to take paid time off a little bit earlier. We're also looking at ways to amend the vacation accrual schedule for that to people to advance and to start with more vacation time. That recommendation, HR committee didn't really say exactly what they wanted it to look like, so we're expecting to draft something separately and bring it directly to council because that should be fiscally neutral. The second level of things we're looking to do is items that need to be considered in next year's budget. The most critical of those is advancing people to midpoint faster. And we're proposing to do that by giving people 6-month increases and year increases until you reach midpoint of the salary range. So employees who are below midpoint would receive 3% increases until they reach midpoint. This would shorten the time to get to midpoint from approximately 8 years to about 4 years, give or take, depending upon your salary range and where you started and all sorts of variables. We're also, because that benefit only benefits those employees who are below midpoint, who are theoretically our less senior employees, we're also looking at something to balance that out and to recognize our more tenured employees. And we're looking at that as a one-time lump sum bonus for employees who are above midpoint. That is likely to come before you guys as an ARPA request because it is a one-time payment. So we're looking at it through that one-time funding source. Another item that's being considered in next year's budget is a culture survey. One of the items that we heard most from feedback from our employee survey was that we have some culture issues going on. And the culture survey is similar to the process that the county has been undergoing for several years now, and it would give us a good baseline of where we're at now, as well as helping to identify the areas most needing for improvement moving forward. I think that was everything. Mary Ann, did I miss anything that you can think of? All right. Any questions about those initiatives?
I have one. With regard to tenured employees, we just approved the full implementation of option 3. That should also help them. With regard to a lump sum non-base building bonus or, incentive, whatever, is there another fund source other than ARPA? Because I guess on its face, I have a little bit of a problem with the optics of taking rescue plan funding for bonuses. I guess I don't care what you call it, but rescue plan funding as it relates to workers and employees was to recover our loss for responding to the pandemic and for people's, exposure to hazardous situations on the job. It really had nothing to do with, making people feel like they're getting a wage that they, are happy with or whatever. So is there another way, because we want ARPA to make an impact in our community that taxpayers can see and feel. And so, is there an option for carryover? Is there an option for, surplus, whatever? I mean, as far as planning for 2022, I guess I would be interested in a different fund source.
Sure. We had originally drafted the one-time lump sum as a budget supplemental request.
Okay.
And so if it was the will of this committee, we could resubmit that. Mary Ann and I were just trying to think creatively, and so we had kind of removed it from the requests. But I don't see any reason why we couldn't add that back in for consideration for other funds.
What is the cost approximately of that bonus?
It's going to depend upon what the bonus looks like. And we were recently brainstorming on that item with the directors' meetings. And so I don't have a number off the top of my head, mostly because that was the step I was at with my supplemental fund, and then we pulled it. So so we didn't finish calculating that. But Mary Ann, do you remember off the top of your head when you drafted it for the couple of samples we put forward? Yeah, I apologize. I don't know that out.
Okay.
I can get that to you, though. When we resubmit the request, obviously, it would have the format of the bonus included in there as well as the cost anticipated.
Because we had, we plan to rank supplements this weekend. So I guess if we could get that so that we have it with the rest of the pack.
Definitely. I can have that out to you guys tomorrow.
Okay. And the other thing is are we confident that such an intervention, a lump sum bonus, will actually truly aid retention? Or will we have a situation where it's essentially viewed by the workforce as a one-time flash in the pan type, measure, to maybe throw money at a greater problem? And will we find that people are still leaving anyway? I think we will. I question whether or not a bonus of any type is a solution to the other problems, because people are still out there looking at the market. They're looking at options in the private sector. They're concerned about their work-life balance. There's all kinds of, other reasons that people, leave. And so I guess depending on what this costs, I guess I would be looking for some reassurance that it will actually solve the problem rather than, much like a short-term refund of some kind. People are happy for a minute and then they forget that, and then we're right back to, our employer doesn't care about us, or we don't, we still don't have, it's never enough, I guess, is what I'm asking. So, I guess I'm concerned about the effectiveness of a bonus.
It's definitely a vulnerability to that approach, because you're right, when it's a one-time item of that nature, we do have a tendency to forget. And also, once it's in your pocket and not contingent upon continued employment, you have it whether you stay or whether you go. There are some ways that we could build the lump sum to try to build a retention aspect to it. For example, we found one municipality that granted a stay bonus for people who stayed during the snow season for their equipment operators. We could also tier out the payment of the lump sum so that it was divided out over the course of the year. The challenges for that are that it has Fair Labor Standards Act implications, and when we start doing those things, we're likely to make the bonus subject to being calculated into our overtime costs, which would be a challenge for payroll. So right now, your overtime cost is calculated based on your normal hourly rate. That bonus would then get built into your normal hourly rate for overtime purposes.
Okay. I guess, even regardless of what you call it, but I guess I'm looking for something, either a structured lump sum or a structured type of bonus, but I guess I'm also looking for something that's more like a longevity incentive, that is something that they work toward, that, has benchmarks, that recognizes that when you've put in, when you've reached that 5th year, the 8th year, the 10th year, whatever, that instead of a little souvenir that we would give you, something of value, but that everyone knows what it is from the outset. It's all the same, the benchmarks are the same, it's not, and then it's predictable. We can plan for it, they can plan for it. And it's something that they work to attain, by developing that career with us, versus a bonus per se. In my mind, the optics of a bonus is that it's performance-based for something you did exceptionally well, and that's just how it's perceived in public as well. And, we have people that do a fantastic job every day, and, I think that the one-time payout sells that short. We want people to come here and build a career, and stay a long time or retire from here like they always have. And, I'm looking for something that's, more of a predictable and universally applied program.
Sure. Back in 2013, the city eliminated the longevity system. That was under a previous HR director, so I wasn't part of that process. But based on the paperwork that I found, it appears that at that time, longevity was built into the pay systems. Under the previous structure, people reached the maximum pay significantly sooner and then received longevity after that. Our pay scales got stretched out a lot, and at that point, the theory was that those continued annual wage increases were a replacement for longevity. So we certainly could look at what building it back in would be. We'd have to look at the existing pay structure to see whether we would be in effect double dipping, but it certainly is an avenue we could pursue.
Okay, because that's, it's ironic that you say that in 2013 we eliminated it because based on the packet materials, it looks like 2014 is when we saw the uptick in this problem. And, so maybe what we're recognizing is the long-term effect of some of the changes that we had made. Now, not to say that we can afford to completely go back to the old, I guess I'll call it antique step and grade system that existed before Act 10. We can't get in that situation because not only can we not afford it, we can't sustain it. But we're operating now with a hybrid approach. And I feel like rather than doing some kind of salary base building type incentive, if we had level benchmarks and finite amounts, like a structured type reward, maybe that's something that's a little bit different than every year, that longevity built into the wage is really the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, that really inflates everything from the, overtime calculations to the base pay calculations to all of the related overhead that goes with employing people, because your wages are all up universally.
Yes.
So I guess I would like to see some analysis of that.
Okay.
Deb?
Thank you, Lisa. I'm sorry I'm late. I was informed at the last minute of a Zoom meeting on transit, which I'm on the board for. But I guess it was something the county set up without letting us know. So I left at 5.
You didn't
and-
miss much. You're good.
So, I guess I had a few other questions for you. It happens when you're talking about the longevity. I happened to kind of get into that scenario when I was working in Milwaukee back in the 90s on a welfare reform research project where they were concerned about losing key people towards the end of the project. So they had built in, I believe it was like $250 a quarter, and that you had to be there for the quarter, and then you got this, I would say, within the next month or whatever. And I understand with all the different shortages, maybe it's something like that could be built in. I ended up getting a detail of the, different departments, and I wanted to look at the vacancies as such. But I got this on Tuesday, so I didn't have a chance to look at it. So I'm hoping I can find some savings so that we could build in some surplus there. And I agree with Lisa, I'd rather not touch the federal dollars for that. But I wanted to ask a little bit more about, I guess, for recruitment and cultural, that I think with a key of some of these vacancies, now is the time to add in bilingual and see if we can do a bonus. It happens a few years ago, right across the street from my district. I was working with a tenant that had a Spanish-speaking landlord, and they kept on having the smoke and the carbon monoxide detector kept on coming on. And they got so frustrated, they took the batteries out. And this was happening the end of the year. And then flu was happening, and I stopped over and I said, well, do not take the batteries out. It may not be the flu at all. It could be carbon monoxide and either your furnace and or your water heater. I had checked with both the fire department. They had no one bilingual. And eventually, I ended up contacting Tony Gonzalez, who does bilingual for the court system. And it ended up, yes, both were defective. And luckily, he got there and resolved it ahead of time. But 3 of his family members, including his wife and 2 of his children, were getting sick. And they thought it was the flu. And this was a serious thing. So I do think we need to look at it, and you probably need to discuss it further at HR of how we can build it in, because I think the more bilingual we have, the more we can handle issues faster without delays, and especially in the different departments. And I know at times we've used the police officers to handle resident complaints with one another, but we need to be able to have that throughout the city. And could you explain a little bit more about what cultural differences you're talking about?
As far as for the feedback that we had on the employee survey, well, we asked a number of questions, including things like, what do you think the city could improve upon? What makes you leave your jobs? What makes you choose a job? And culture was always high on that topic. It was a free-form survey, so it was pretty complicated to compile the information together to see trends. When I talked about culture, that could be anything from negative comments about management, issues with shift, looking for flexibility, hours, coworkers. So it's a pretty broad topic, which is one of the reasons why we're looking at following it up with a culture survey, which could dive into that in more depth.
And I think what's on the agenda for tonight is the moving current employees to step 3 in 2021. So there would be a resolution brought forth to council, and the financial implication is $16,000.
Yes.
And then the supplemental request that's in your packet is for 2022, which would then start that accelerated step where people would move up a step every 6 months until they reach midpoint.
Okay?
Yes, we
So
were
just
looking at
to
the.
delineate
Yeah, the
between the
items
subjects here.
that have been recommended by HR committee for immediate approval, I believe were kind of the agenda
Right,
topics.
so those are the ones that we have to act on tonight, which is to suspend step 1 and 2 on the wage scale, and then move anybody in those scales to step 3, and then recruit starting at step 3, and then allow for the borrowing of the week of vacation. And so that will go to council for this year's expenses. Is there a motion to accept those two options? Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Herbst? Oh, Watson, sorry. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, so that motion carries. So
Thank
we're
you.
good on the 2021, and then, so you have a supplement included in our pack for the midpoint advance
Yes.
and for the tenured employees, regardless of how we fund it.
The tenured employees, no.
You don't have, okay.
No.
So we'll look for a separate supplement on that once Tony develops
Okay.
some of the numbers. I mean, we need to know what it costs first and what other revenue sources might be available to pay for it, because if we
Okay.
decide we want to build that in,
Okay.
we would want a separate supplement on that for one of our future sessions then.
Okay.
All right, so
sounds
that
good.
knocks out number 2, right? So we're back to number 1, which is our 2022 budget. And Mary Ann was just starting to talk about transit.
Yeah, and I don't know, Greg, if you want to come up, just so that he's the pro here. I think, the transit received funds in 2020, a large allotment that is, available for not only capital, but operating. When we were working on the 2021 budget, we levied for Metro Ride in a fashion similar to prior years. So we had levied $889,000. At that point, we didn't know whether we were going to use it all or not, or need it all or not, because of the amount of CARES dollars. So Greg has been working on a financial plan. So Greg, they have your handout from your budget that you were
Okay.
going to submit to the transit tomorrow.
Okay,
So I don't know if you want to walk them through it, or,
they have the stimulus,
yep,
Fund
their
exhibit?
first page is the operating summary,
okay,
followed by the stimulus page, and then the bus procurement.
okay, so let's start with the stimulus page.
Okay?
So, as Mary Ann said, in 2020, we did receive CARES funds in the amount of about $3.2 million. And the use for transit was really pretty broad. It allows us to address revenues that were not collected, increased expenses for the response to COVID. But the overall definition was, it was assumed that anything after January 20th, 2020, any expenditures were in response to COVID. And so it's almost kind of anything goes. But one of the peripheral uses was to assist your municipality in dealing with COVID. And so we, in 2020, applied CARES funds to reduce the levy amount and create a larger amount in our reserve fund. But in 2021, we got a second round. We have not yet applied for those funds. We haven't determined exactly what it is they're going to be used for. But the total amount is almost $1.3 million. And so what I've done, as I said, in 2020, we used it to draw down the city's levy amount for transit. And we're proposing to do that again in 2021 and 2022, and we will probably do it again in 2023. My concern over that time frame is getting back on the levy. I met with Mary Ann and the mayor, and we discussed this scenario, and my overarching concern is, these funds are to be used by the municipality and by the transit system, but at some point, we have to kind of get back to reality, and, you're going to have to pay for our services locally through the levy, and I don't want there to be a big cut at the end. So anyway, I thought I'd lay that out there. In terms of the budget summary, so we have to apply CARES funds as an offset to expense, so as a contra expense. So if you look at the exhibit here for 2021, we've got our gross expense. We've got another contra expense, which happens to be paratransit funding. CARES funds is subtracted, and then to supplement our normal operating assistance, the state decided to award us all some ARPA funds to be used specifically for operating assistance. So that's applied as a contra expense as well. And so we get a net expense, reduce that total by our operating income, which is customer fares and advertising and so on, and we get a deficit. And so we can use our normal operating assistance up to 50% of the deficit. The other key here is the local share, which is the City of Wausau line item. That one has to cover at least 20% of the funds that we receive from the state. So 20% of the 8521 amount, which is state elderly disabled funding, and also the 8520 line item, state 8520. So 20% of those combined amounts the city has to pay for. And so those are the two things we have to worry about, the 50% of deficit for federal, the 20% of the amount we receive for state. And so in order to arrive at the numbers on this page, I've applied CARES funds to get us to about 50% federal, and that gets us to about almost 32% for the state. And so I've done that for 21, 22, and 23. So that's how the numbers are generated.
Okay. And so we know, and I think we would ask, both this committee and the council to recognize through its budget processes that although they are receiving, what amounts to almost a complete levy offset for these 3 years to operate the transit system, that they would begin to plan and commit to the fact that in 2024, that funding not only goes away, but it comes back to the levy. And, because we don't want to have that cut at the end, we certainly don't want to lose our system. And, through that, the next 2 to 3 years, hopefully we also will be able to create some things that would increase our ridership by choice. We can look at, a number of various options and, maybe make that system more attractive to riders by choice versus riders out of necessity. And so that, too, can shift the public's perception and utilization of our transit system about the same time that we have to, bear that cost again. But I certainly can't imagine that our goal or the council's goal would ever be to not take the system back into the levy and not fund it. I just have never heard that from any of our councils that we've been working through. So
the I guess, alternative that Greg and I have put together, so if you look at the PowerPoint here, his levy that was adopted in the 2021 budget is the $889,000. He is going to take $262,340, which is on his budget sheet, and that will be applied in his operating budget, and the balance of that, $627,000, will go to his surplus to fund capital requests. In 2022, then, we would propose to levy $889,000. The allocation of that $889,000 would be the Metro ride would get $388,883, and then we would take the balance of that 501 and apply it to our capital budget, to the city's general capital requests. And then in 2023, that 891 would still be there. Again, as Greg said, that's a little ways out to actually plan how it would be used, but it would still be part of our levy, so it would still be available for transit. So when you look at the transit's capital, as Greg said, in 2020, we levied the 889,000, but we didn't need it because he had CARES funds. So that created a Metro Ride surplus down on the bottom of the PowerPoint of about 780,000. In 2021, based on that previous slide and his handout, 627 of that 890 isn't needed, so he now has a surplus of about 1,406,000. And so he's got a variety of capital projects that he already is interested in, or were approved in the 2021 budget, and so they would be funded from these capital dollars. His phone system replacement, the local share of the bus purchase, so that was going to come out of shared revenue, so it would come out of here instead. His door control system, the video system upgrades, the fueling software, his fare box replacement, the service truck replacement, and the fuel. So that the commitment of all of those is about 400,000. So that would leave him in reserves about 1.6 million, which would then give him continued opportunities to commit to capital. And I think tomorrow we were going to put a budget mod on for the agenda because the fuel tank compliance upgrade is kind of a last minute need that he has this year to comply with state regulations. But so you could see that the transit, even though we would be reallocating that money, still would have $1 million of capital reserves for future replacements, as well as then we would have that 890,000 earmarked, as a continuation in the budget. And it wouldn't, have gone someplace else where it was relied upon.
Right, so in 2024, you wouldn't have to reinstate a levy that has disappeared.
Right.
I think that certainly makes sense, and I think that I love that they would have a reserve to participate in capital because Metro Ride has had such struggles with capital and equipment. I mean, this really puts them in a situation where they've come a long way from when they were competing in CIP for a floor scrubber and a van for the manager to drive, and they couldn't get either one. So thank heavens for this. And, I think that, there was a lot of things, that's why his capital project list is so long. A lot of stuff was left go at Metro Ride, just to salvage the service and keep it. So I'm inspired to see that there's a plan to get them what they need and not cut them short. So
I am hopeful that the Federal Transportation Act will give us a boost. The current bill proposes a roughly 30% increase for public transit funding. Now, that's not to say that the state of Wisconsin won't offset that, as has happened in the past, but, that may help us transition, back to the levy if, we get a little help with the load at the federal level.
if we get to that point too, where we're seeing an opening up of some funding, not just for capital, but maybe for operations, would that allow us to experiment with the possibility of some limited restoration of Saturday service on certain routes, or the limited restoration of, maybe some longer hours on the most popular routes a couple days a week to get people where they need to go?
Well, should there be an expansion of federal operating assistance, the answer is yes. The challenge with any of the CARES funds or capital money is that's a one-time source, and it's, to start up, to gear up, to hire, to acquire equipment, and so on. We wouldn't want to do that with one-time money. But if there was an expansion of federal money or state money, for that matter, that would certainly be an opportunity for those things.
Perfect. Okay.
So then, as we pointed out, about 500,000 of our levy would be reallocated to our capital plan. we went over our capital plan last week during our budget meeting. The capital plan, as it's proposed, is 9.6 million, which is a significant capital plan for us. Some of the drivers, or two big drivers of that, are the ERP system and the 1.1 million for the fleet facility. When we look at what our funding sources of that 9.6 million, we have our $494,000, which is what we levied in 2021 for capital. So if that remained the same, special assessment income of 144. There are a number of capital requests that have grant funding. If you recall, we went through those. It was the airport gets significant capital funding. Obviously, transits, all of theirs were going to be funded by grants. The fire department got AFG grant. So the total of those grants came to the $2,361,000. Typically, we would have a local share of the Metro Ride requests, and so, those would come out of that reserve and are part of the list that's on his bus procurement, or that we went through earlier, where typically we would pay our local share. Like the buses was 109 or 179,000. So that's Metro Ride reserves. And then several of the projects that are proposed would qualify for ARPA funding. Those would include the $81,000 park project to replace all of our drinking water fountains in the parks. Those would qualify for ARPA because obviously they would prevent the transmission of disease. And then there is also a component of ARPA for improving IT security. And so a couple of the smaller IT projects also qualified for ARPA. So if we elected to do that, that basically leaves a gap of 6.2 million, which would be debt funded. Our target has always been somewhere around $2.5 to $3.5 million of debt issues each year. So if we look at that transit levy reallocation of the 500,000, that helps reduce it. Many communities, in going through their budgets this year, are actually applying ARPA funds to their budget. Again, capital is a key area to do that because it's a one-time expense with one-time money. If you recall, a component of the ARPA is your revenue loss calculation. And so our revenue loss calculation for this last year is just slightly over $2 million. Because of the significance of some of our capital projects, I had earmarked that maybe we would want to use 850 of that revenue loss allocation to help prevent the issuance of debt. And then, if we wanted to take out that fleet facility, SISM right now is tackling that project and looking at alternate locations. And it seems like it might be premature to budget for something at this point when, 1.1 million is just a place maker. It's not based on, in my mind, a real cost at this point. That would get us down to the 3.7. And, by moving the fleet out of the budget, it gives us the opportunity to look at the project as a whole and do more financial planning.
Do we have the option, now the CIP committee ranked the fleet facility high. They recognized the need, they wanted that completed. Given the fact that the length of time it will take to not only select a site, vet a site, design it, whatever, just so that we don't have to send that project back through CIP again, knowing that we want to move forward also with a fleet facility. I mean, the Mercury study has already identified that we need one. if we pull that or hold on that funding for the fleet facility, the 1.5 million this year, can we commit in advance to that amount, at least that amount for '23, so that we're not going to have to go through and re-rank, rescore, and then basically pull the rug out from under that plan? They're going to need to study it at some point. So I guess I would like to see us, if we're going to hold back on it for 2022, I would like to see us commit to it, or commit ourselves to it, to properly fund it in '23. Because, if it takes them 6 months to get off the ground with finding a site and, at least getting going on the design, I think if we don't have that funding in the wings somewhere, or at least recognize the need for it, it's not going to get in. And then they're stalled again. So, Deb.
Thank you, Lisa. I guess I just feel like having the 1,150,000, can't we set it aside as a contingency or a reserve? I just think that this may take a little longer to happen. I happened to drive over by West Street to look at the county facilities. It's bigger than I thought it was. And I guess I see it as kind of ideal. But I think with what happened with the water and sewer, I think there's a lesson learned that we should be planning on replacement even when the new plants are done, for future that will be happening in a decade or 2 decades from now. And so I think, and then we could be investing some of it, so to be getting some interest. So I would want to keep it in my opinion. Thank you.
So I think, you can do it, there's really no right or wrong, I guess, way to accomplish this. You could leave it in and we could revisit, typically before we go and borrow money, I go through all of the projects, update, I look at, any savings from projects that we have from the year before, and we apply that cash on hand to future projects so that we're not. Right, and we borrow less.
Sure.
And at some point, I would imagine that engineering is going to come before a committee, because they'll want to hire an architectural
Yes.
firm. And so, those will all require council approval of some level. And so, I guess we can leave this in as a place marker, or you could change the amount. It really is.
I think it is good to keep it in there as a placeholder, because the last thing we want is a delay in being able to, let's assume that if all of the stars aligned and they were ready to go sooner than we thought, if we don't have the money, then we're stalled again. So I think that Alder Ryan is right. I think we should keep that placeholder. And then when we come to do the borrowing, we may find that, if we're late into the year, maybe we only need half of it for that year. And maybe we borrow the rest the following year or whatever, depending on how that shakes out. But Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess and I think you kind of touched on part of the question I have about budgeting the fleet facility for the '22 budget versus putting it aside for '23, is because we may not know, if we borrow that money in '22, we may get a more advantageous interest rate versus '23. I don't know what's, none of us have a crystal ball, but, we're looking at a bit of inflation right now. And I don't know if that's going to be a shorter term or a longer term inflation, but
Agreed.
we might be, if there's no penalty for us for carrying that load, getting that money now and putting it aside for a project that'll probably happen in '23, then it might be more, even just to take a little bit heavier load now in the borrowing to be more fiscally sound in the long run.
Right, especially we save on interest.
Yeah,
It's
and
huge.
you would want to, I guess it would require a little bit of additional analysis. You're supposed to spend your proceeds within 2 years. So we would have to, ensure that we felt we were going to spend it on a timely basis. The other thing is it's always good to look at a project as a whole, because then you can do the proper financial planning. You know, if it's going to be a $15 million project or a $9 million project, it's good to know what your total is. We have had a history of issuing 20-year debt on facilities because, you know, the facility itself will probably have a
Long life.
50 or 60-year life.
Yep.
But there's, you know, those kinds of planning can still take place, you know, as more information is revealed. And so
Sure.
I certainly have no problem leaving it in the budget, if that is the will of the committee and the council.
I think that
don't
it's
see a problem
also
with
a
that.
more transparent public approach too,
Sure.
where this project doesn't disappear out of our narrative and then suddenly reappear. I mean, if it follows a stable trajectory,
Mm-hmm.
CIP, we didn't get it last year in CIP, they ranked it high this year, we know that we want to budget for it. The logistics maybe aren't quite there yet, but, you know, that on all of the public-facing end of everything, they understand that it's definitely in our plan to, you know, design, start, and finish this within the next few years, so that's good for us. Committee, are you guys in agreement leaving that in for now? Okay, everyone's nodding. I think we're good.
Okay, so then I can redo the numbers. You know, one of the things that we have been working towards is retiring our debt. You know, when we, at the end of 2020, we had about $82 million worth of debt. At the end of 2022, based on that 3.7, we would have about $73 million worth of debt. That includes the additional borrowing that we would have for TID 12 for the rest of the WAS project and for, you know, the streets for, in that mall area. But the plan, our current obligations require that we retire 10.4 million. We'd be adding this on. You know, those projects in the mall, you know, we have submitted grant requests for some of that funds. So, you know, depending on if we had success, that would be another way that we would reduce our borrowing, as well as, you know, the timing of the project. So, you know, depending on whether the slab was going to stay in place for a little bit longer, those projects would then get delayed.
Right, and if
So-
we would phase that borrowing over maybe more than
Yes.
one cycle, you
Which
know,
is what we
versus
did, yep.
what we expect,
Yep.
yes.
And then when we look at our debt limit, you can see that we were at a high of about 57, almost 58% of our limit. We would be down at the end of next year to about 44%. And that, you know, that limit is based on our equalized value. So having our equalized value go down by 2% really, you know, created a change in what percentage we'd utilize of our debt, but we still are, you know, below our 50%.
Well, and once we're past that correction, we would expect that that
Yes.
should level itself off then, and?
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
Do you think that that correction and the impact of the correction will affect any of our ratings with Moody's, or not?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I mean, you just never know. I mean, if you
Right.
look like you're above the percentage, but knowing how it happened, I think that's certainly something they also could forecast
Mm-hmm.
with a reval, so.
So how do people feel about the 850 allocation of ARPA funds? One of the things, you know, again, the goal was to drive down our borrowing needs and use that lost revenue component. And, you know, it's less than 50% of the lost revenue component. You know, if communities are doing it, handling these situations, you know, differently. I was looking at the county's budget, and the county administrator highlights those capital projects that he thinks would be good applications of ARPA funds, but basically says, if you don't use ARPA, I'm going to, you know, we're going to have to borrow for the projects.
See, these projects feel like they make sense for ARPA, though. I mean, we definitely had an operating loss. We definitely had a revenue loss. I mean, there's all kinds of, you know, fees, permits, things that, you know, we knew all along last year in reviewing our budget weren't coming in. Our income was, you know, we were paying a bunch of overtime. We had, you know, all kinds of, you know, issues with revenue not coming in. I mean, even things as simple as parking. People weren't moving around, they weren't parking, no money was coming in. We were giving away the bus for free. I mean, all the things that we waived license fees on all of our taverns to help them out. And so that all was a loss for us. And I think that is, on the public-facing end, exactly what ARPA was for in our context. So I just, as one member, I don't have a problem with the 858 because yeah, I had a problem with the bonus situation, but this completely makes sense to me. I guess, how do you guys feel? As far as,
Well, for me, I would like to see more of a breakdown about the revenue loss, in what regard. That it just seemed that with the way the pandemic ended and with a lot of the 400 block events canceled, we also saved money and not having to do a lot of overtime.
Right. So the revenue calculation is dictated by the federal government, and so it doesn't look at all at expenses. It only looks at revenues. And the formula specifies, for example, you take out all of the transfers to and from the organization. So, for example, if the water utility made a payment to the city, that's eliminated as interagency a transfer. The water utilities activity and the transit's activity are eliminated. We weren't allowed to include those revenue changes. So even though transit was not charging their fares, we weren't allowed to use that in the computation because the bus is specifically excluded.
Okay.
Sewer is not excluded from the calculation.
Okay.
And then also any federal revenues that you received were excluded from the calculation. Even federal dollars that flowed through the state or another agency. So we went through, I went through and did a calculation based on that formula, and the Government Finance Officers Association put together a worksheet for people to use.
Okay.
And then the calculation specifies that you use 2019 as your base year, and then you're allowed to assume that your revenues, so you take your base year and you multiply it by 4%, because that's what they're assuming you should see in growth each year. And then you compare your computation to that 4% increase to 2019, and that gap becomes your
loss.
eligible revenue loss.
so we, though, at one point, when the pandemic was well in its early stages, were tracking the cost of things like overtime. We had people in quarantine, we had people out sick, we had the police department on a robust alternate schedule. We were buying fogging equipment.
Yep.
We had all sorts of, we were doing enhanced cleaning in these buildings. We were doing enhanced cleaning in facilities like ramps and stuff. So were all of those figures allowed in?
No, because those are expenses.
Oh, okay.
Only revenues. But if you recall, we got, $700,000 from the state, which again flowed from the federal government, so that wasn't considered revenue in this
Okay.
computation.
Because I see that as
But
a
that-
loss, but yes.
Yeah, so it's purely looking at revenues. Like your
Okay.
expense is not anywhere in the computation.
Well, and so in my mind, even with the computation using the matrix that it uses, when I contemplate the application of ARPA to stuff like this, it's to also make us whole for all of that. Because the practical application for us, where the rubber met the road in our budget, was that we incurred all of those expenses. We spent all of that money we had to respond. So even though their matrix is only looking at revenue loss, it feels to me like our net loss is all of it together. So, or at least our total loss. So, Michael?
Yeah, and I'm going to tend to agree because we did have, wide-ranging losses. But if you look at the revenue shortfalls we had last year, I think this is a good application of ARPA funds because what we waived was stuff like license fees, pet license, restaurant liquor, free bus fare, parking. We did charge for parking for I don't know how many months. Interest payments that we waived. So the revenues were broad-based, and it affected many different segments of our population. So it's not like it was a gift to any one or certain segment of our population. It was, wide ranging. So I think, yeah, I'm going to agree that this is a good application of ARPA funds.
And we will go through, because then when we complete 2021, we'll go through another calculation and to determine if we have revenue loss in 2021, because the formula then says, okay, so we took 2019 and we multiplied it by 4%. Now we get to take that new number and multiply it by 4% again and compare that to our revenue in 2021. And so in theory, I believe we are still going to see a sizable calculation there because, our parking revenues are still way down. We are seeing a slow recovery in things like municipal court. Our interest income now is way down. So we are going to likely see another calculation, and the benefit, regardless of how you choose to use the ARPA funds, the benefit of that revenue loss computation is it generally can be used for any government service. So it eliminates and it expands your usage opportunities. So that is, the value. Whether we choose to use it, you do need to use it for government services. But we could use it for things outside of just the water, sewer, and storm sewer.
Yep.
So
that- it
that's
does
the
make-
benefit of
That
it.
makes a lot of sense. Sarah, you had a question? Go ahead, and then Deb.
That was actually my question. I was going to ask you, like, what else we could use the other 1.5 million, or however much I've left over.
Right.
But I also think a lot of the things that are on this list are going to benefit the taxpayer too. So, they're going to
That's
see
true.
the new tennis court, they're going to see, athletic park scoreboard. So I'm definitely for it.
And I think I'd like to, once we get the budget adopted, be able to bring to the committee an application form for ARPA funds. And, kind of vet what we want that process to look like. So I'm thinking, if not the last November meeting, the first meeting in December, I'll have an application for your consideration.
So that's one that we would use internally to access those funds, that we would use to
Yes.
determine the appropriateness.
Yes, and
Okay.
then, some communities are taking their funds and, earmarking it into large categories, and others are not. So I think, we could come up with maybe some possible options for you to consider of how you want to establish a framework for the dollars. And so we could do that,
Yeah.
shortly after we're.
I'm a fan of a
Kinda-
consistent process that we can use internally and that we can use also to determine, how we want to use those funds. So Deb, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Lisa. I guess I'm not so convinced that we really had that much of a revenue loss when you look at the grants and you look at the federal funding that you're excluding. And then, again, because of all the major events that were canceled, we saved on a lot of overtime or having more staff, and then especially, for the 400 events, we have GPW, as well as the police that were spending a lot of time on those special events. So we did save a lot. Part of it, when looking at the revenue loss of $850, to me, that's equivalent to about $300,000 per year that could go to lead lateral replacements, where we have estimated 9,200 between commercial as well as residential. And I've been advocating about 8 years, and maybe some people don't understand, as part of my role with Catholic Charity, I was doing HUD housing counseling. So part of that was looking at lead paint, it was looking at lead laterals, looking at safe homes, getting good inspectors, looking at home warranty, looking at electrical, looking at, plumbing, your condition of your home. But we are a large community with older homes. And I have been watching some of the Water Commission meetings about, homes that were built before 1960 are tending to be in that category. I know we don't have enough money overall, even for the 15 million to handle it all. But a key role for the federal funds were to help in water and sewer infrastructure or improvements, and the lead issue was part of that discussion. Now, part of it could be used, from my understanding, of upgrading some parks in low disadvantaged communities. And I guess I don't have a problem with that. I know we've had some that have been done on 2 to 3 per year, and that some may have, minor things and would like something better for in their neighborhood. And I do think that is worthwhile as well. And then, too, some of it could be for affordable housing. And for the dorm housing, it is solid, inside and out. And that there is a potential to make it into affordable housing. And as a municipality, we can designate some of those funds to go to another not-for-profit, which could be the Community Development Housing Authority, or it could be another not-for-profit, say they took ownership and would use it as a transitional or homeless shelter and use that in the cost of making some upgrades. So there's a number of different ways, and part of it could be done on the sewer end. Instead of digging down, they could go in through the manholes, clean out the sewer, temporarily shut down those connections at the residential at the curb, and put in an inner lining, so to save in the long run of having to dig up older sewers by having this inner lining that would solve the issues. So there's a number of different ways, and I understand from the Water Commission, they're coming up with ways of looking at how to get a survey, and we'll be bringing that up soon. And I guess I just wanted to mention that I think hiring some college students during the summer might be a good way, and not city employees, as a way to get more cooperation from neighbors and allowing to go into people's home and determining, do they have a lead lateral or not? But I do feel that with what you're saying, Mary Ann, and being an accountant as well, we had reduced expenditures, and I guess I cannot support the revenue loss allocation when we really need to focus on the lead laterals for our community and try to get this out, because it's happened in Flint in the last 10 years. It's made national attention. We may not get this opportunity ever again to have these funds. And for all the people that live in these homes that can't afford it, or are renting homes where the landlord can't afford to do all of it, this is the time to make it happen, or go in the direction to make it happen. And if the city of Green Bay was able to do it, why can't we?
Thank you.
So point of order.
Go ahead.
The agenda item we're discussing, it's on the budget process, not the
It is,
CARES
so
funding.
we're trying to
ARPA fund.
substantiate the need for the 858,000 in ARPA funds as part of the fund sources for the capital program. But, as Alder Ryan was making her comments, I'd made a couple notes. And so when we talk about revenue loss, I think it's important to recognize that there were no events in 2020, but in 2021, there absolutely were. Events came roaring back. So the savings and we've made decisions as councils historically that we don't charge organizers of events for our services. So, whether there's events or not, we're budgeting to employ the people that would ordinarily be at the events. But that said, the only savings we had in 2020 from, I guess, I won't say the only, but a significant savings we had in 2020 was when we decided not to open the swimming pools. And immediately we decided that in exchange for not giving people their swimming pools, we wanted to give them something else that they could appreciate. And so we took the savings, like $100,000 from not opening the pools, and we bought brand-new play equipment for Oak Island. And so it wasn't like we were squirreling away that money by any means. Through our CIP process for the last 5 to 7 years, we have caught up on play equipment in parks. We were doing a couple a year, and I believe this last cycle was the last ones that were getting done. So, I think that, not to unpack all of the work of the SISM committee, but there's times that slip lining in sewers isn't appropriate, it doesn't work. They're not all conducive to that, and I think there's also, even if we were to apply $858,000 of ARPA here, we have an awful lot of ARPA left, and the Water Commission is looking at ways to address lead laterals and, make that problem go away sooner than later. So, absent a report from them and a consultant, and plumbers to do the work, I think that we can make a significant impact in that cause, but I also don't feel like it should be our only cause, because we have lots of problems to solve with all this money. So, I guess, Sarah, go ahead.
And I guess the thing that sold me on it is that doing the lost revenue, you can use it for other things outside of those big main tenants. So I sort of like that versatility that we could throw at different places. So that's why I'm for it.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I think we need to be careful too with coupling the expenses in community events with our city's own expenses, because the funding source for many of those community events comes out of room tax dollars, which is outside of our general capital budget. So while there was a savings in 2020 because those events may not have run, our room tax revenue was way down too in 2020.
Correct.
So it's as a general consideration, we need to kind of keep those two things sort of separate in our deliberations on what's considered a revenue loss and what's considered an expense that the city can justify for these types of fund reimbursements.
Sure. Okay. Deb, go ahead.
Thank you, Lisa. I guess I think, Lisa, you had said you were going to clarify at some point, and maybe it's at the next SISM, about what's been done with the Parks Department, but I guess I want to make you aware that when you look at other communities that have events like Milwaukee in their arena, they have staff that actually are there and hired to do that and be able to do that. For the 400 block, we are not having, like, for the kayak races, volunteers that are setting the things up. We are having our police and our DPW staff do that work. So whether there's room tax dollars for the event to help pay for the special event that comes, we are subsidizing each of those events with city staff. And in the long run, other communities, like the Balloon Festival that ended up out in Marathon or Stettin, they use strictly volunteers. So when I said, are you sure you can do this? I mean, do you really have enough people? That they were saving us thousands of dollars and maybe tens of thousands of dollars because it wasn't involving all of these city staff. So, and there's a concern on my part that eventually, yes, Wausau events, 400 block events, in my opinion, should be led by volunteers and not be subsidized by thousands, and I have no idea of the amount, but are we talking $10,000 to $50,000 to $75,000 a year where the city is subsidizing these events? And that in other communities, they are doing volunteers that are able to go ahead and do that. So you have to look at the overall perspective and see between DPW and the police, as well as the Parks Department, what actually is the amount of time that city staff are actually working at the 400 block
Okay,
for these special
We're
events.
a little bit of a field of our agenda, though. I mean, the 400 block fund is not just for the hosting of events, it's for the maintenance of the 400 block, and which is a tremendous expense for us, because the park department employs, a turf specialist and all kinds of, they provide all kinds of specialized services to that venue, to athletic park. There's all kinds of, that soccer field, there's all kinds of things that the city represents in the park department budget that are not other county functions. So, we're, I guess, way off in the Wausau events realm. My point about events and event funding, whether you have events or not, is you pay the city employee the same. You budget to pay that employee for their work week for the entire year. So whether that person is closing off 4th Street for a concert or whether they're driving the street sweeper, you're still paying that person. Whatever their work assignment for the day is, it is. And unless you have a situation where you have asked a department to staff up for overtime to meet demand, you're still paying those people. And so our budget from a staff standpoint isn't a whole lot different whether there's events or not. I guess that's just my observation in trying to deal with event funding, is you have the same number of employees all year, and, you pay them either way. So, I guess for the purpose of getting past this capital funding, where are we at as a committee? Do we want to leave the 858 in there for ARPA until we get further into this process and then make the decision about the full integration of the 858? Is that kind of where we're heading?
Okay.
And let's see where the rest of this process takes us.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
I will disagree.
okay. So we'll just, I guess for the planning purposes, that the majority of the committee has agreed to leave in the 858 for now of the ARPA funding as a capital fund source.
Okay. So then we could kind of go over how we've organized the supplemental requests so that people kind of have a good lay of the land. And if you wanted to have, if departments wanted to come up and, answer any questions or present their requests if they had, something specific. Otherwise, they can do that tomorrow night as well. If you recall, when we had this structural gap in our budget, and so we took out what I'll call kind of the increase of non-personnel costs, and we asked people to submit supplemental requests. So the first 2 pages are those items. And so then we said, if you, and it was really each department's prerogative to determine how much they wanted to, highlight that they felt was really critical in their department to add back in. And so they classified those if there was an actual contractual obligation that they were trying to pay, if it was anticipated inflation, if it was service demands that were causing the increase financial need in their operating budget, or an administrative need. And so you can see that we have them, so similar ones are grouped together. So, like the Parks Department requests might not be all in order, because some of them might fall up into contractual obligation, and then some of them might fall down into service demands. And those total, the total impact to the general fund of those are $177,412. So, the departments are asking to have their budget reinstated with those amounts. And then the third page of the summary are what we call our traditional supplemental requests, where they're enhancements or something new to the budget.
Okay. So the last page is new spending, and this is cost to continue, basically,
Yes, exactly.
these other
Oh, way
25.
to summarize it. Yep, that's exactly
Okay.
right.
So in the realm of, I guess I have a question, within the realm of contractual obligations, barring the option of contract default, how do we have the option to say no to those expenses?
Right, and I think, and that was one of the things that we wanted to talk about. You as a group could decide that's our top priority to add those back into the budget. And, you may feel like you don't even need to rank those because you just think that they should get top priority.
That's, I guess, the question for the committee, because, with a contractual obligation, that's a legal obligation for us, is the option of contract default shouldn't be a choice, I guess, that we would make. And so with contractual obligations, do we want to rank and score them? Or do we want to, as a committee, issue the directive that those are automatically met? I mean, we've got 38, 48, what, about $65,000
Yeah.
worth? $25,000 roughly is a penny on the mill rate. So, I mean, we're not even looking at a tremendous taxpayer impact, even if those were levy dependent. What do you guys think on that? Just the contractual obligations, not score them, just build them right back in?
I would build them right back in. I mean, we've already voted on this in a prior budget.
Right,
so
I mean, we're committed.
we're
And,
committed
even
to
if they're
them.
multi-year contracts, you don't exit now over, $2,000 or $7,000 or whatever. So go ahead.
Could you repeat that, Lisa? I was looking up the Parks Department about the elevator, and I guess I just feel like that should be charged to Athletic Park for.
Well, I was talking about these first two pages, which are essentially our cost to continue. These are items that were removed from the department budgets to set them back to the 2021 budget level. The first 6 are contractual obligations. And so my question to the committee was, the only option to not fund these is contract default. So if that is the immediate consequence of not funding this stuff, do we want to rank and score them at all? Or do we want to give a direction as a committee that these 6 items are automatically built right back into the 22 budget? Because by and large, they add up to about $65,000. And our general rule was that $25,000 is roughly 1 cent on the mill rate. So even if they were all levy dependent, you're not even looking at 3 cents in tax. I mean, I'm using round numbers, so.
I guess since I was just given the packet now, I would prefer to wait and then talk about it tomorrow. Because like for the elevator, I think that cost for the maintenance should go into additional rental charges annually then,
So
increases
but-
for use of the athletic park.
Okay, so regardless of whether or not we recover any of our charges, we have to pay the bill. And so if we want to go back and fight with facility users about charging them a little more, that's a totally separate debate. When the bill comes from the elevator company, we have to pay the elevator company. We own the place. So do we just build these back in because we know that these bills are coming? I guess, Sarah.
And just scanning through some of this stuff, I mean, it sounds like some of these contracts are helping us recover expenses, because if we had to do it on our own, it would be more expensive, or maybe be ADA compliant is the elevator issue, right? We want to make sure that's safe. Are there any of these contracts that are coming up to expire, or are we sort of midterm?
Yeah, I would imagine that they're midterm.
Okay.
And like the GIS one, we just actually entered into that one recently. The garbage is a 10-year contract that we entered into in 2016. The audit we just entered into, the G2 alerting system, that's a relatively new contract, right, Robert? Yep.
Last year, right?
Yeah, and I believe the recreation software is a relatively new contract too, because I think maybe in the last year or two, they just recently switched vendors on their software. I'm not sure about the public safety one. Do you know, Matt, what that's for?
I think that has to do with the facilities maintenance and cleaning
Oh,
up.
okay.
Okay, so, that's the thing, is if we're under some contractual obligation to finish these projects or carry them forward, that's, I guess, as a committee, we should make that decision as far as what we're going to do with those, because we have to decide what we're going to rank and score. That's where I'm trying to get us to.
I'd prefer just to tear off these top 2 sheets and put them in the budget. And then just
You
focus on
could
the
do
next one.
that too if you wanted to.
That's an option you have. I mean, obviously, inflation is happening. There's no question about that. So you also have, in addition to the top 6, you have 8 more that are, or 7 more that are shown as inflation. So if the cost of pool chemicals, lumber, paint, machinery and supplies, and EMS supplies are going up, I guess I ask the question again, do we have a choice on those that merits ranking and scoring? Because the more stuff you rank and score, the more you're throwing stuff into competition against itself and everything else that's on the list. And so, inflation, you've got 19. So what do we got here?
Like about 42,000?
Right.
Are we working with the county on purchasing similar supplies like for police and sheriff? I would think that if we did some purchasing together, that there could be some savings. Are we doing that?
Well, I think the biggest inflationary increase is with EMS supplies. So that, probably the county isn't purchasing EMS supplies. I don't know, Robert, if you want to come up and speak to the impact of,
Well, and I guess that's
the
my
current
concern,
economy
because when
on
the call
EMS
comes, you
supplies.
answer, and people expect that you're going to arrive with drugs and bandages. So, I mean, we don't have, there's some of this stuff that, these ought to be like non-political processes, I guess. I mean, go ahead, Chief.
Correct. So, and the pandemic has had a drastic effect, not just in the fact that we're using more PPE supplies on every call. We're still transporting COVID positive patients or suspected COVID positive patient to outfit a paramedic in disposable gown, mask, face shield, gloves, probably 2 pair of gloves, booties, $17 per paramedic per call. That price has risen, of course. We've had a drastic increase in our price, 300% increase in our price of our gloves. So every paramedic is wearing multiple pairs of those every day. And so it's just the everyday stuff that we're in need of that we don't have another substitute. There's no reusable, disposable EMS supplies. I'll speak to the cooperative purchasing. So we do enter in any contract that we can to say as far as the state or other things. We work with our vendors. We've got we're on solid ground to make sure that we're getting best pricing, and our EMS division chief does a fine job of making sure that that's current. And he'll even shop at Amazon on occasion. If he can find stuff cheaper there, he will. But typically our vendors are, because we're a reliable purchaser for them, and we've got good working relationships with them. We haven't had any problems with that. So you really need to work with agencies around us because they have the same contracts that we do, the same suppliers.
and we did reach out to our billing consultant to see if we would be able to pass this on to the patients. And after their analysis, they indicated, we have such a huge Medicare, Medicaid base, and in those situations, the regulations are really tight, and there really isn't an opportunity to pass on the supply costs, the actual supply costs, onto the patient. And so they didn't really think that we could go in that route and recover the costs through the billing.
Okay.
And they actually were not recommending a rate increase this year.
No.
Right,
And it's
so-
84% of the patients that we transport are under Medicare. We bill to that rate. If we exceed that rate, they're not going to be able to pay it. It's going to be just part of our write-off at the end.
Sure.
And so it doesn't do any good.
So I guess that begs the question then, do we rank and score anything marked inflation, which is items 7 through 13 on the list? What are your thoughts, committee? Do you want to build those items back in? Okay.
Well, and we never know where price levels are going to fluctuate. So, I mean, having that cushion in there.
Right.
So the first contractual obligations, I added it up. It came to 84,625. I think we were talking more 60,000,
Okay.
but
So 84?
84,625, and then the inflationary is 41,500.
Thank you for doing that. Okay. And then, you get down to service demands, and the largest of the service demands is street patching and hot mix. We've had so many discussions in SISM about road conditions, and so many complaints from residents about fixing broken streets, that, I guess I feel like that is, and it's 50,000 in addition to the normal, because we'd been adding 50,000 a year, right? So the line item for that budget, was it about 300,
It was a little more like 250.
250? So, I mean, we can fix a lot more holes if we have,
Our hot mix budget for 2021 was $100,000. We're trying to get it up to 250,000 on an
Okay.
annual basis.
so this only gets you to 250, or to 150,
To 150, yeah.
so half of what we need.
I thought we had not gone ahead and decided on all the surplus from last year, which we had said we would talk about for hot mix.
I
So
thought the
what
sur-
happened with the
Are you talking about
balance?
his department surplus or the city
No,
surplus?
overall,
The overall surplus went to the motor pool a few weeks ago.
not the whole amount.
It did.
No, it did not.
Nearly the whole amount. I mean,
No,
the
it did
surplus
not.
was like $1 million, and we allocated 900,000. So it
Okay.
was nearly the whole thing.
So we still have 100,000 that it was not designated, and a number of alders had said we wanted to go to the hot mix, at least on SISM.
Well, right, and we had a discussion in this committee about the contingency fund, because that has never, ever been, it's not been built up for a decade. So, and that's our emergency expense fund. So,
We can certainly put that on next, the November, or the October 26th agenda.
for the
if
remaining
you'd like.
surplus? Let's-
Yeah,
Yes,
I would
let's
say so.
discuss that.
Okay.
So I had a quick question too about the service ones. There's quite a few on here that are 0. So I mean, do they have to be scored?
Oh,
Net budget impact of 0?
yeah, so if you recall, when we went through the presentation on the budget, in that central capital purchasing fund, we've been trying to build that up. So last year, meaning the 2021 budget, we had 20,000 designated for, I guess I'll call it transportation or public works type of capital improvements, and then, or capital purchases. And then in the 2022 budget, we had 30,000 budgeted for. So in conversations, when Eric submitted his supplemental requests for the survey equipment and I guess the survey and, I guess it's all survey equipment, we asked him if that would be, option for him to use those funds, and he said yes. So I guess we maybe could have pulled those out of the,
So so the one-time expense for the survey equipment,
yeah.
so 3,500, we could pull.
Yeah,
so all
and
of
the 7,000 and the
And the
55.
5,000. So everything that's in that is available to be funded by central capital purchasing, which is a fund we created special so departments get what they need. So we could strike that from the scoring because they're funded, correct? So
Yes.
we'll take out, so that would take out item 20, 21, and 22.
Correct.
On that cost to continue list.
Which are you referring to? The service demands for public works, you're
Yes.
saying?
Yes.
All
so-
three categories?
Yep, 20,
Line.
21, and 22. So digital level replacement, engineering survey equipment replacement, and robot data collector. All of those are funded from the capital, from the equipment fund.
Where are you seeing the numbers? I don't see any 20, 21,
They're on the
22.
spreadsheet on the
On
side.
page 2.
Oh, I'm looking at this.
On the spreadsheet she gave out, the 3-page,
Or Debbie, you can look at page 7.
she's got them numbered. So the first 2 pages are the cost to continue. This is where I've been adding them up.
What page is that?
It's the second page of the spreadsheet. It was 3 pages, but page 2.
And there was another 0 for police for the crossing guard program?
Yep.
Yes, because there's an offset from the school district for that, correct?
Yes.
So 20, 21, and 22, we're not going to consider.
We're not going to score that because they're already funded by the equipment fund that we created.
Okay, thank you.
And then, okay, so now we're kind of working our way back up. So I guess let's just for a second circle back to hot mix. So even if we were to devote 100,000-ish from the surplus, if they're trying to get to 300,000 and this 50 only gets them to 150, the surplus notwithstanding, do we want to rank the 50,000 for the hot mix or leave it in? Or build it back in?
I still want to see it, and then we'll discuss the surplus. We have too many roads that are not going to get redone for decades. So we have to go with a hot mix, or otherwise they're all going to
Right,
be
okay, but
one big pothole in the streets.
When you come to your scoring though for the weekend, do you want to put hot mix in competition with other things, or do you want to automatically build hot mix into the 22 budget?
You know, as much as I like smooth roads, I think I want to put the hot mix into the scoring with everything else.
Okay.
Since at this point, this is 50,000, we're trying to build back into the budget.
Correct.
So I'd like to see that scored.
Okay. Committee members, are you good with scoring hot mix at item 18?
I'll
Okay,
be okay with it, but I guess for some other items now, like replacement printer, a couple of years ago, I bought
well,
an Epson that is a laser for $300.
Okay.
Well, you want 2,000?
well, let's get to the HR stuff separate. We're kind of jumping all over the sheet here. So we decided we were going to build back in item 1 through 6. We were going to build back in items 7 through 12. Then we got to the, now we're up to 13 through 18, which is service demands. We started with pool chemicals for $2,000. Are we going to just build in pool chemicals?
I thought pool chemicals was inflation, so
Oh,
we'd
I'm
actually
sorry.
start
Yep,
at 14.
yep. Okay, you're right, correct. 14, that brings us then down to,
I'm getting lost here, so please slow down.
okay, so start on this spreadsheet here, this that Mary Ann gave out tonight. We got a 3-pager. So page 1 and 2.
I agree with 1, 2, 3. For the celebration, though, I think
She's
you
on
can be
page
doing it for a
We're
lot
not-
less.
That's the new stuff. We're not to that page yet. All of that stuff has to get ranked. So when you get to the one that has
What page are
the
you
10
referring to then?
Okay, so we have a 3-page spreadsheet.
I got 2. There's 3.
That's page 1.
Okay.
Okay, so page 1, you'll have number 1 through 18. We've
Okay.
decided that we're not going to score 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's the contractual stuff. So that builds back in 84,625. Then we decided we were not going to score the inflationary adjustments, which takes care of 7 through 13 on that sheet. That adds back in $42,500. And now we're going through service demands, and we kind of skipped around, but we decided we're going to score hot mix for 50,000, which is number 18, so I circled that one. Now, if we take this kind of in order after that, 14, 15, 16, and 17 are police department. The item 14 is equipment and supplies for 14,000. And
Again, I would like to say, we need to be looking at how we can work with the county and the city and getting these supplies, so
Well,
hopefully to
okay.
get them at discounts.
So I'm asking the deputy chief, who stepped up to the podium and is so patient with us, to run through for us quickly what that line item entails.
Sure. We do the best we can to partner with other organizations to see if we can reduce costs. Unfortunately, in this case, I don't think it's appropriate to partner. The $10,000 is, which I would say for this committee, is for retrofitting additional office space for us, and Marion and I have been working together to try and find a way with 2021 budget dollars that exist to be able to do that this year and not have it affect the 2022 budget. So I will give a piece here to the committee and say, go ahead and take your Sharpie out and eliminate $10,000 from the 14,412.
Okay.
So just leave the $4,412 in.
Okay.
And that has to do with office equipment. Like, we don't partner with the county when we're purchasing, and some of that has to do with our contracts with CCIT in we need additional phone, we need an additional printer, we need computers for the staff that we have. So that's where that $4,412 comes in.
Okay.
Is the equipment for us to do our job, not police-specific equipment.
Okay.
PD operational contracts and supplies, that is a dollar figure that was come up when we look historically. Inflation would probably count for that on what our needs are in paper supplies within the organization, toilet paper, cleaning supplies, and we look at what we anticipate those expenses to be, and that's where that $3,800 came from.
Okay.
And then if we go down to body armor vests, officers' body armor expires every 5 years. It gives us the ability to accurately forecast how many vests we need to purchase for our staff when they come due for those. That's an obligation we have to our officers. And the vast majority of the expense associated with body armor comes from federal grants that we receive every year. So that $1,650 really represents maybe 10% of the actual cost of replacing body armor for our staff. So that's our cut of that. And then I would just let the committee know that under crossing guards, it's a wash because we have a revenue of $44,825 and we have an expense. And that dollar figure, the first year the Wausau School District offered to help cover the additional cost of outsourcing crossing guards, we figured out what is the percentage of our overall budget that they offered us at that point in time, and then the school district has agreed that each year, based on what the new contract would be, we would apply that percentage instead of, because obviously the price continues to go up, they want to pay their fair share of that. So we entered into agreement with them, and that's the $44,825. That's what that represents.
Okay, so that is actually pre-funded. So, committee, where are you at with items? Go ahead, Dawn. Oh, turn your mic on, sorry.
I was under the impression that the crossing guard money's $44,825, that this was contracted to a company out of California, is that correct?
It is. We contract with all city management services. The cost of crossing guard services-ish is about $150,000 a year, of which the Wausau School District provides us with $44,825.
Okay, so the school district supplies you with the $44,825.
Correct.
Okay, and then the rest of the money for the crossing guard comes from
The levy.
the levy.
But that's already in your budget, right? Historically, we've not ever deleted that funding?
Correct. That's already in our budget.
It's the same money they were using to pay the crossing guards when they managed them.
Okay, but here we go. I don't want to bring up anything bad, but I'm going to do it anyhow.
Let her rip.
How come there seems to be, and I've talked to you about this briefly, communication is terrible, training is terrible, crossing guards are very, very upset. They just feel that the police department should do more. And to me, when I look at this and it appears that the PD is paying part of this, obviously they're not then, okay?
Nope, the PD's paying the vast majority of the cost of crossing guards.
Then.
About 2/3.
2/3, okay, so if they're
Ish.
paying 2/3, then why can't there be some power over these people that are supposed to be in charge of training these crossing guards and supervising these crossing guards instead of berating them? And, you know, you're under the HIPAA laws, you're not supposed to discuss problems with one person to the other, and they're doing that type of thing. I don't feel that the crossing guards are being treated very fairly, and I get a lot of phone calls.
Sure, so do I.
I know you do.
And I think we'd be off topic if I discussed the amount of communication I have with all
Right.
city management services and the things that are being put in place to try and remediate the consistent concerns of crossing guards, which were the exact same when I supervised them. But those issues are being addressed, and we do, as a police department, have authority over them. We're the ones that sign the contract with them. But
Okay.
I would be more than happy with you to sit down and discuss what the issues are specifically, what's been validated, and what interventions have been put in place with all city management services on their behalf and on ours.
I think they would be very happy to have these people that supposedly train and supervise sit down there with them and have meetings, or it just seems to be a lack of communication. That's why I was under the impression, yeah, the police department is involved in paying part of the money, then they should step up to the plate as well. You know, they're feeling very let down, and I know there's two sides to every story.
Yep.
But I was concerned when I saw 44,825, wow.
It's really 150.
Yeah, right, 150.
Right.
But
So
the
the
fact that.
the remainder is the money that we have historically always applied to crossing guards, whether we employ them or whether they employ them, right? And
Yes,
so
ma'am.
because the outsourcing costs so much more, the school district agreed to absorb the excess, is where the 44 came from, right?
Yeah, their percentage.
Okay, so then that leaves us with item 17 as a supplement, really not being a city cost. That's funded by the district. So we would not need to rank 17. Where are you guys at, given the fact that 14 has been reduced to $4,412? Where are you guys at with building back in 14, 15, and 16? So that's the 3,800 for paper products. I guess I don't want to be the person that tells people they have to bring their own paper products to work. I just don't think that's a good idea. Then we've got 4,412 on the other supplies that are not building materials because they have funding in their budget for it, to right-size their office space for their people. And then body armor vests, our portion at 1,650, you know, that again seems to be a critical need. We've tried to avoid having critical safety equipment compete in our processes.
I agree with you, Lisa. These are minimal, so I don't think they're worth ranking.
Okay, so 14, 15, and 16 we'll take off the list. Okay, so on that page, we're ranking item 18 only, which is hot mix. Then we come to the second page that starts with item 19, well, we're up to Public Works now. We already decided we weren't going to rank 20, 21, and 22 because they were central purchasing fund expenses. Item number 19 is tuition and training increase for employees at streets for $6,200. I guess we have the Public Works Director with us. My guess is that training and that tuition and training increase partly related to the number of new people that are there and are coming on? I mean, are we getting those folks up to speed?
Yeah, so we've had a significant turnover. We've had some retirements. And so, when new people come on, we have to provide them additional training. And so, yeah, this is to accommodate for that for 2022 as
Okay.
we bring people on.
What are your thoughts on that item 19 then, committee? Build that back in?
I had a question
Go ahead.
that the new superintendent had stopped by the Westies meeting last week, and in talking to a few of our neighbors, we had encouraged that having people that don't have CDL is a part of what Metro Ride does for training, and that we had suggested that might help with DPW as well, is that kind of opening the door for people that may not have had those opportunities in the past, if that could be added. So I don't know, I would think that's not in your budget here, Eric?
Right, I think, yeah, so.
The HR director is running up from the back.
Yeah, thanks.
I saw that
Yeah.
in her plan for recommendations.
Yes, HR actually has a supplemental budget request on that topic.
Okay, because our neighbors thought it was a good idea, and that it could open up a whole more field of people that may have not had the advantage, and that we did feel that it's something at this point that we may have some new people that come on board then, that we gave them a first chance at a new career as well as the training, and that may feel a lot more loyalty to the city for giving them that step up. So,
Sure. That is
thank you.
item number 5 on page 3, so we will certainly circle back to that. Okay, so then we're not going to rank 19, 20, 21, and 22 out of Public Works. So that leaves us, the last 3 are HR. Advertising funding at $6,500. Is that for advertising openings and postings, Tony? or promotions as far as for the recruitment part?
It would be for external recruitments. We've had some interest this year in doing radio ads and things that are more expensive than our traditional advertising sources. A single radio ad right now would wipe out my entire advertising budget. So I'm just looking to be able to do, we were looking at bus wraps, radio ads. Our hope is to be able to do things like that to get us a little bit more out there for the community.
Okay.
Tony, are you using Indeed.com and some other websites as well?
Yes.
I know the Job Center has encouraged a lot of people to go to different websites as a way to find out what jobs there are.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Indeed actually picks up our ads for free, which is an amazing cost saving for us as a municipality. But we still don't have enough money to actually do a lot of paid ads. A monster ad is usually about $800 to $1,000. Radio ad is, we're looking at like, the 6,000 would probably get us like a radio ad spot.
Okay. So, given the fact that we're trying to address that recruitment and retention situation, do you guys want to, because that is kind of new, do you guys want to rank that advertising? Or build it in? Build it in? We got 2 for build it in. Michael, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I guess I got a question. Would the would you be targeting the types of, for this type of advertising, the types of employees that we need to backfill in these critical areas like DPW, transit, police, and fire? Or are you looking at some of these other higher level recruitments?
I think that would probably be a game day decision. I had a meeting with the directors, the fire chief, the DPW director, the Metro Ride director, and we were talking about whether individually targeted ads or general ads, just saying, think of the city as a place to work. Here's all of the openings we have. And I think we'd have to decide at the moment what we're looking at. I think a targeted ad for mechanics on the radio would probably be very helpful. Where the ads appear sometimes is governed by the type of candidate that we are targeting. So ideally, it would be a combination of the two. We would do general ads as well as specific ones for hard-to-fill positions.
Okay.
I guess I go to the auto stores quite often to do little things on my own, and it just seems that I've advocated for hiring more women in the parts department, both at dealerships as well as some auto places. So I think even some of those ads on the bulletin board and that
So
might be helpful.
do we want to fund the ads then? Do we want to build them back in?
I guess I'm just concerned, are you using the Job Center as well website for that? That it just, I guess I just don't know if you're really going to be one way or the other. Is it worth it for us as a city where we don't have a unlimited fund? And I know from, again, the last Westies meeting, we talked about the other neighbors were saying, look at what the benefits you get, the benefits package and the retirement and that. And so it just seems that some of that, I don't know if you can be doing in other ways or doing YouTube or putting it out there on Facebook, kind of things. But I guess on radio or TV, I just don't know if these younger people, if that's the way they're tuning in.
Well,
And so it may take some other type of social media as a way to attract them, and maybe you're coming to some of the neighborhood meetings.
I guess to keep us on track, with no money, she's really basically not doing it at all. So what we're looking at for mill rate impact at $6,500 is like a third of a penny.
Yeah, it's a
So
drop in the bucket, so
Do
can we just
do we just
include it?
build it and not mess around with the scoring on that? Yeah. Okay. Now, we've got professional services is the one-time cost for $25,000. And
Is that for the culture study?
No, I believe that was for building up funding for future wage study.
okay, and so we know that we do that, is it every 5 years?
Yes.
Okay, so that's coming around again then in '23?
Wage study, the work on it would be in '23, and it would be implemented in '24 if we stay on our current schedule.
Okay, so then do we want to build in funding in '22? Or rank it, or remove it? It's a, because did we figure a wage study was 250,000-ish?
Yeah, last year, the vendor for the wage study cost us last time, the vendor cost us 80,000, and implementation was, full implementation, I think, was $250,000.
Okay, so 25,000 won't get us far.
No,
Don't you have that information through the state database or the federal database based on job description?
Well, this was a private sector comparison, right?
we did a public and a private sector comparison, and actually, I would be recommending for our next wage study that we do a custom study where we could pick our comparables. Some of the negative feedback we've gotten about the last wage study is that some of our neighboring municipalities are paying better. And if we did a custom survey, we could say, compare us to these folks. And I think we would get a lot more buy-in from our feedback and also a lot more area-specific responses.
Well, we get really relevant regional data, I think, if we did that, versus trying to compare, our equipment operator to, a private sector, contractor-based industry that may not do the exact same work.
Yeah.
Michael?
Yeah, and I think too, if we move this off to be scored, or if we skip it for a year, I think we're gonna push the wage study back, it's invariably, it's gonna be pushed back a year. And with the tight labor market we're in now, we're kind of at a critical juncture, because we're, right now, the stuff that we're doing to try to make our existing wage and salary levels work in this, at this point in time is counterproductive to our overall compensation package. So I think we need to kind of keep
Keep it in?
we need to keep moving forward towards a new wage study as
Yeah,
soon as we can.
I don't disagree. It doesn't do a whole lot of good for us to make ourselves more attractive as a workplace and then, do nothing to keep pace with market, or at least verify that we are.
And I think it helps a lot with morale if
Yeah.
you have a good quality wage study, because then it's like you're not just pulling figures out of the air, so
Yeah.
So
One
do you
of the-
want to rank it, or do you want to build it right in?
build in.
Build it?
One option you would have too is, we'll likely have reserves in 2021's budget too. Our financial projection for 2021 is looking favorable. I would call that more of a one-time cost. You could set aside reserves for the study at that point and not build it into your levy.
So would you fund it
that
out of,
would be
fund it
another-
out of carryover,
Yeah,
maybe?
that's what I'm thinking. That
So-
would be another alternative for you to consider.
That's one thing we could look at, is we could approve it tentatively, assuming that there would be carryover funds available. And then you wouldn't have to rank it, because it would be built right in there, as long as we're able to fund it with that,
This would be a good candidate for a carryover if we do have a carryover.
for sure. And then the last item we have in HR is replacement printer. Can't this item come from the, we have, every year, we build funds into the IT budget for replacement computers and things, like computer
Sure,
replacement?
PC
And I want to
replacement.
say it was like 20,000 a year, 25,000 a year we were giving them.
Oh, it's like 80.
It's 80, okay, well, there we go. So out of that allocation, do we not have any money for a printer for Tony?
Oh, we
Can
could
we
take
check
it
with
out
them
of
and
PC
see?
replacement. Sure. I'll
So-
check on that. I can report back tomorrow.
Yes, if it can't, then fine, but if we can get it out of PC replacement, it's just one less thing that we have to
Okay.
rank and whatever, so, okay. Let's take it off for now, unless she finds out that it's not available from the money that we already give IT. Okay, so then, now when we go to page 3 of the spreadsheet, page 3 is new spending. This is what we traditionally used to rank and score as supplements, because it's for new money not currently in the city budget. And so we have 10 of those,
So we're only really ranking the hot mix? on
hot
the-
mix, and then these 10.
Okay.
So, unless you decide that you want to, unless there's, something is fully funded or whatever on this new list. So the new list, and you have some write-ups from the departments here as far as what those are. And I believe we have our department heads with us also if you have questions. So Item number 1 is $58,000 for emerald ash borer management. You know, we've been grappling with that for a few years now, trying to cut down ash trees and then medicate the ones that are salvageable. And I think Jamie is on WebEx, if you guys have questions for her on that item.
I'll ask a question on.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay.
Jamie, are you on? Can you hear us?
I
Okay,
Is-
perfect.
I didn't have a chance to read this, but is the emerald ash borer management, is that for treatment and insecticides, or is that for eliminating the ash trees? Because I thought Parks and Rec were going to start just the wholesale removal of ash trees in our city.
Yes, correct. It is both, actually. So when we brought this back to the Parks Committee earlier this year, we revised the plan knowing that the emerald ash borer is within the community. And originally, we had thought maybe a 6 to 7 year plan for removal of all the ash trees and then replacement and then treatment of those that aren't being removed on those given years. The committee chose to push it out longer as long as we don't see standing dead hazardous trees to a 12 to 15 year cycle. So we put together a cost estimate on average to get to that with the number of ash trees we had. Our actual budget should be for this about $250,000 a year. Our current budget includes $107,000, which is what we've had in there for the last couple of years. So rather than asking for the full amount, because it's a very large increase, I've asked for a portion of that, and that is to bring us closer to that 12 to 15 year plan of the removal of the ash tree, the replacement of those, and then the treatment of the ones not being removed each year. So it won't, get us to the full amount that we need, but this is to pay for all three: the removal, the replacement, and additional treatment. And eventually that treatment will go down as the number of ash trees reduces, our treatment costs will go down. But we continue, every ash tree that's standing right now that's a public tree has been treated once. So now we start the next cycle, and we will do it so that the ones that are being treated are not set for removal within that 3-year period.
Okay. Do you know how many ash trees are in the city? Or at least how many public ash trees we have?
I do. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I do know we did give that to the Parks Committee. Yeah, and that's what our numbers are based off of.
Okay. But this doesn't, but none of this then accounts for any trees that are privately owned then? So this
No,
won't solve the problem, but it'll help mitigate to the.
correct.
Okay.
It'll help solve our problem, it just won't
It'll help
solve the
solve our
residents'
problem,
problems.
yeah. And I think maybe that's the key.
Okay.
Is that because the trees we're responsible for, we have to remove or
Or fix.
So, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, so does anyone else have questions for Jamie on ash borer? Deb, go ahead.
Jamie, I was driving around part in my area, like on Elm Street or Green Hill and that, and there's a number of areas that don't have sidewalks. So if they're within the 5 feet of the curb and they're on people's residential property, is that something that the city's responsible for?
Yes, I don't know exactly 5 feet, but we do have a map that shows where the street right-of-way goes, and that's what we go off of, and with whatever is within that right-of-way area is considered city tree, so we would work on, yes.
Okay.
Okay, because I know there's been a lot of activity in my area, and I would think all over for people having trees cut down. I have talked to some of my residents, and they really seem to be against planting any more trees on the sidewalks because they feel like in the long run, they're contributing to being pushed into a small area, causing heaving and cracks. And I did some driving around in Weston, and at least the streets I went down, there was not one tree on the boulevard. And so, are you planning to plant a few thousand new trees on the boulevard this coming budget?
We are, and there is also a guideline that our city forester follows as to how wide the boulevard has to be to plant a tree, and they pick species that fit within that. He's also working with engineering, that if we know of a new sidewalk going in, there is something we can put down that can help reduce the heaving of those sidewalks. So they are working on that to reduce that impact to any of the infrastructure, but we would not put a tree in where it doesn't fit.
Okay, because
All right.
it happens, I have talked to a few people that said that they did not want trees planted on their area, they don't want to maintain them, and I guess I feel like in some ways, in some of the boulevards that we have around the city, that we're planting a lot of trees where no one can park,
Okay. Yep.
because it's a major highway.
Okay, let's keep ourselves on track here. The street tree, feasibility of street trees certainly can be taken up by the park committee at some point. We just have to pay the bill. And so they've told us they need $58,000 for this. So these new expenses we normally rank. You guys are okay with ranking and scoring that item as item number 1? Item number 2 is public access. You've got a request for closed captioning server, one-time cost, and then there is some small ongoing expense as well. We've talked about closed captioning with them for quite a while. And based on the evolving technology surrounding it and whatnot, we had opted to stay with the plan that we had for a while until such time that, it was feasible to do that. And so what we have here now is a request from them where they can, it looks like, do it a little bit better and have it up and running within 3 months, I guess. Do you guys have questions on that? I don't know if we have Dave with us tonight on, we don't have Dave Dickinson with us on this item. He's the closed captioning guy. Go ahead, Sarah.
So I guess my question is there a way to pay the one-time fee some other way other than building it into the budget? Because it is bringing us to be ADA compliant. So I don't know if any of the federal funds we can use or.
Yeah, you could definitely, again, if you wanted to say you were going to seek another revenue source and advise the staff to submit it for an ARP consideration, generally, I think that would fit within, like the revenue loss component, because it,
Well, and it does
So
also
if-
allow people to
and it's a
participate
one-
in our meetings
Right.
remotely without subjecting themselves to a room full of people.
right, and it is a one-time, the ongoing, there's, if you see, there's like 2 components. One is $6,000, which I believe will upgrade the software and keep it
Sure.
Contemporary going forward, but the $50,000 is a one-time purchase for the servers and the, related things. So,
Okay.
you could, make a recommendation that we seek another funding source rather than a levy funding.
Because I would like to see the subscription, like, we can rank the contract, because that's an ongoing expense, but, it would be nice to see if we could get that 50G somewhere else, or 50K.
Well, and what we can do too is if we rank the project as a whole, depending on how they score, then, you also can pick and you can move that list around. And then we can start to look for alternative funding sources also, once we have the results next Tuesday. Because then when we get to session number 4 of this, then we'll have the ranking results, and then we'll figure out kind of where we're at with the money we have, the borrowing we need, and then whatever the alternative fund sources would fill in, then we kind of see where the holes are. So if you guys are okay with scoring this as an entire project, based on its merits, not necessarily the cost, just the need and the scope.
I think we've been way behind, so yes, and even if there was another grant, I would say ARPA funding.
Okay, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, and I know Dave's not here, so I'm not going to ask questions, but I'm just going to make a comment because, yeah, I think we should score this.
Okay,
And I'd like to, and I would like to see if we could find the capital outlay from another source. I know previously, closed captioning has come up in prior terms, where we've had to submit a waiver to the FCC.
yes.
Because it's, and we were just using at that time, or what we're doing now, is the YouTube captioning, which does not allow for live captioning, real-time captioning. And this is the equipment that would give us the capability for real-time captioning. So
I
if we
think
want,
we've been hoping for a long time that this technology would catch up and be affordable enough that we could ever, eventually get it. So-
yeah, unfortunately, I think there's a little bit of a human element involved too.
Yeah.
And that's why there's these expenses.
Okay,
But, yeah, so let's.
all right,
yeah.
let's score that up.
Can I make a
Go ahead,
comment?
Sarah,
though?
sure.
I mean, honestly, I probably would score this as number 1 because it needs to be done. But like, could we just put the contractual services in the budget and not even score it and just try to find the 50 grand some other way?
I think we could do it with the ARPA.
Yeah, well, and knowing that, the thing is that it's still new spending, so you would still rank it. And, you know, you rank it based on this criteria where it generates 100 points or 80 or 90 or whatever. And so, once you have the final score sheet, even if something doesn't score at the top, you can still take it and pull it into what you're gonna fund, and then you can discern your fund sources. So if we know at that point that we wanted to use ARPA for it, or that we had an alternative fund source, we would mark that as the way we're gonna pay for it, but we would build it in the budget. It just wouldn't count towards the levy increase or decrease or whatever. So you could, you can score the entire project.
I think we would need to score the entire project,
Yes.
especially if we were going to use ARPA funds, because we need a justification.
Indeed. Okay, let's do that. Next one we have on our list is an arborist, a .9 FTE arborist for the park department. And you've got that request. It looks like this is also kind of tied to the ash tree. According to Jamie's narrative, it's really looks like it's tied to some of the extra work that they've taken on with the emerald ash borer stuff. And ideally, and we've got her right up in here where she talks about being able to, you know, free up people for other work as well. And then, Jamie, do you have comments on this arborist at all? I mean, this is an increase over your current staff, right? So you'd have 5 then, well, you'd have 4.9?
Yes, that is correct. And with the Emerald Ash Borer being that 12 to 15-year plan, this is definitely a need. We only have 4 arborists currently, and I did put in there information about, you know, the ideal parks crew, if we're taking down a large tree, is 4 people for safety purposes. So when we do that, we don't do treatment right now to the Emerald Ash Borer. We do have help from seasonals as well for this, but having an additional arborist would greatly increase our ability to keep up with what's funded and what we have planned to do. So that is where that request is.
Is this
Would it-
totally city funded, or is there a county share on this person?
It's a 10% county share, so it's our arborists and most of our tree crew is allocated 90% city, 10% county.
Okay.
Would it also guarantee that maybe all of these trees in the downtown that are missing, that are empty grates filled with weeds, that we could get trees there too?
That could be a priority we put forward, yes.
Okay. All right, let's,
And then is the county considering that 10% portion? I mean, do you,
It's currently included in the budget that's gone forward, and so far, the county board hasn't approved our budgets yet, but it's not a supplemental request or anything, it's just included with our budget submittal.
okay. So we'll score that with the batch. The next one is item number 4, is a request from the mayor's office. Wausau will be celebrating its sesquicentennial, and she is looking for a public-facing event to celebrate and commemorate Wausau's sesquicentennial. So likely to be tagged to other large events in the city so that its attendance is maximized. Now, at one point, we had the mayor on WebEx. I think she might be off of there now, though.
gone.
Is she off? Okay. So this is something that we could score, you know, and see how we come out.
Yeah, I guess I'm okay about scoring it. It just seems that with the videographers and Facebook, a lot of things that there's, in my opinion, there could be, the budget could be reduced quite a bit.
Sure.
But-
And that's not to say it would score at the top. We don't know. I mean, we have to rank it against everything else we have, and see where it shakes out. This is the next one is from Human Resources, is the item that the director just mentioned a minute ago, is 50,000 for CDL training funds, which is exactly the plan you were talking about, Deb, where if people come to us without that, that they'd have the option to receive some training to go get it. We'll rank that as well. Okay, so then that brings us to item 6.
Could I hold a minute on
Sure,
that?
yeah.
Could you come forward? Thank you. I had thought under some of the ARPA funds that are coming through, I think there is some ways municipalities can go ahead and ask for these training budgets. So I don't know if you've checked the last week or two, but there could be potentially some funding.
You know, I haven't, because I was anticipating this being a continuing request as we continue to want to train employees to get a CDL. So I wasn't considering a one-time funding source for it, because I was expecting it to continue in the budget. To
Well,
some
I think
extent.
it can, but if you can get grant funds for it, or if we can use it for multiple departments as a way to kind of have a apprenticeship program, per se, and the feds will fund it, why not?
Okay.
Very good, and I can certainly look into that.
Okay, so we'll put that in our score stack here. Well, they're kind of, all new stuff is in our score stack, but just a quick review of them. So the next one is shared administrative administrative assistant 2 position, shared between police and fire for 30,000. And we've got Deputy Chief Barnes, welcome back.
Just played rock, paper, scissors with the fire chief.
I saw that,
lost.
yes.
So it turns out we have a great partnership with the fire department. We talk about what our internal challenges are on a regular basis. One of our significant ones is this council was gracious enough to meet the expectations of the community. We got body cameras. They're wonderful. Except that with the advent of body cameras, the amount of open records requests has skyrocketed since getting them, because everyone wants to see themselves on camera. The problem with that is we need clerical staff trained in redaction to sit down and watch every minute of body cam footage. Some cases are, if you got 10 officers that are there for 3 hours, that's 30 hours of sitting down waiting to hear or see the things that have to be redacted. So we know that we needed about 0.3 FTEs to be able to have the ability for the community, when they open records, request something, to get it in what we consider to be a reasonable amount of time, which is outlined in our supplemental budget request. And at the same time, we know that the fire department has one clerical person, and that doesn't meet the expectations that I've heard this council give us about what happens if you're one person that knows how to do the job and the billing and all the clerical duties, which, I mean, I'll tell you, if our clerical staff walked out tomorrow, I don't know how to do it. And I'm pretty sure Bob doesn't know how to do it. So to be able to have some backup, that if someone's out with FMLA or leaves, that there's someone that can step in to be able to meet those needs. And they're growing, and their challenges, they could use half of that 0.6 FTE as well. So we feel like that sets both our departments up for success and protects us if somebody gets hurt or has to be out of the office, that we can still function effectively.
Sure. Okay.
If you don't mind, I'll make a couple comments on
Okay.
the backside
For
of
sure.
Matt's there, to specifically speak about the need for an additional admin person or time in our department. And it's not a lot of times just the clerical work, as you would expect an admin assistant would do. Our admin assistant is very diverse in what she provides for our department, and actually having in there on a daily basis provides a lot of technical savvy that's applied for our operations side every day. So anytime in this new, technical world, we've got to move rigs around in and out of service, there needs to be moves inside the CAD. She's the one that does that. There's technical issues that arise with our image trend program, and then how that links over to LifeQuest. She's the one that handles that. And we lack any redundancy in those things. And so even when she takes a day off or uses vacation time, we're left scrambling, and believe me, you're not the guy I'm not the geek squad. You don't want me messing in there. I'll totally mess it up. And so what we thought was by having this is it may be intermittent when we ask for that PD person to come over, but Mindy's perfectly willing to train that person. When she's going to be off, that person knows how to come in and assist us on that technical side of our operations that have become so vital to our everyday work.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for elaborating on that, even after you won the rock, paper, scissors, so. Okay, the next one is HR. This is one called Adjust Salary Scale. This is the 2022 cost to suspend step 1 and 2 that we just talked about. And that looks like the annual cost of that is $105,445.
This is for the 6-month step increases
Correct.
until
Right.
midpoint.
Yep. So,
Is this both the 6-month step increases and the, and eliminating 1 and 2, or is this just the 6-month step increases?
because this one says, the implementation timetable says suspension of step 1 and 2 would occur in '21
Yeah.
with a salary step increase to incur with the implementation. So does this also contemplate hiring new at step 3?
Yes, but the fiscal impact is really just the additional step increases.
Okay, because we would have already knocked the other part out in the '21 budget. All right,
Yes.
excellent.
So
So
this is the 6-month increase?
this is the 6-month increases because
Okay.
we pre-funded the other.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's see, Economic and Community Development is our next one. Looking for an admin assistant 2.6 FTE, partially funded with block grant. And you'll see a narrative there from the department. And we have Liz with us, actually, the director, if you have questions for her about the position or about the duties the person would do. You want to come up and talk to us about that, Liz? Welcome.
Thank you. Absolutely. I'm happy to talk to you about this. We are actually the only department without an administrative assistant. So I think that we could definitely use one. We have plenty of administrative work that right now our planner, assistant planner, community development manager, community development specialist, myself, and our new economic development manager are doing that could easily be housed in an administrative role and would actually result in us being able to focus on larger, big picture items and result in better customer service. We are, constantly getting pulled away from our desks with walk-ins that we have to attend to, whereas if we had an administrative assistant up front able to help us, especially at those prime hours of the day when we tend to get a lot of visitors. I think I got pulled away at least 2 or 3 times today. That would be incredibly helpful to the efficiency of our department. So I'm happy to help, or happy to answer any questions about what the need or what that looks like.
Well, and I think on the front-facing end of things, too, if you're trying to work with the development community and pull projects together and go out and sell Wausau, the idea that you would be pulled away to perform the clerical tasks as well certainly stretches you a little bit far. So it certainly makes sense that there would be an ask. Committee members, any questions for Liz at all? Okay, if not, we'll put that in the rank and score pile.
Thank you.
Thank you. 2 left. Recreation, .48 FTE recreation supervisor to assist with pool management and increased programming. And part of that is funded, you'll see on your write-up, by recreational programs and fees that are charged for swim lessons. And this is pretty self-explanatory. Any questions for Jamie on this item? Okay, that'll go right into the rank and score. And then here's our last one, is $3,750 funded by pool admission fees, but an ask for $13,038 to extend the pool season at one pool for 2 weeks. And there has been, at least as a representative of a district that has an outdoor pool, this has been something that's been asked for since the new pools opened. Right now, most of our pool staff are college students that go back early. And then, of course, you don't have enough staff to staff all 3 pools. And then at least at my house, the phone rings and people say it's August 12th and it's 90 degrees and my kids can't swim today. And so I totally understand this one. I guess, do you guys have questions for Jamie on, she wouldn't have enough to run them all longer, but even if you keep one open or rotate the one that's open or whatever, that probably is a customer service perk. Jamie, do you have anything else on this one?
Sorry. Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add is this has been a request from our Parks Committee a few times, and I think the bringing this forward as a supplemental was really just to bring awareness of the cost of what it is to have a pool open for another 2 weeks. So it does have a slight cost, but it does have a slight revenue with it too. If we can keep it open, we can, maybe generate more revenue, or if we know we're going to be open longer, then down the line, maybe we raise our season pass fees because we're offering more. But it may be a challenge too. We had a challenge this year of even staffing the pool. So it really is also contingent upon how much staff we have left that doesn't go back to school and is available to
That and the
staff.
weather, if it's cold and rainy, then we're in trouble too, so.
Correct, yeah.
But, yeah, this is something that I've been asked for by my district every year for the last 3. If we could at least squeak one more week out of the opportunity for kids to swim. So, so we've got that in our scoring pile. So that brings us to the end of those supplements. All of the supplements together, if we total them up, these 10 for the new spending are totaled up here at the bottom. And then we'll add to that item 18 from that first sheet, which is that hot mix. So then you've got in your packet these scoring sheets that have these probably look familiar. They're the same ones that we use for CIP and things. And so, on them, you have the space to score like everything that was on these lists. Make sure that you eliminate the stuff that we eliminated and only score item 18 and then all the new stuff. And so we would work on this ranking and scoring. If we could get these to you, Marianne, by Monday, is that sufficient to have the report for Tuesday? Or would you want them sooner?
No, that should be,
Because that gives us the
yeah,
weekend
that
then
should
as
be
well.
plenty of time. Even Tuesday morning, I think, would be plenty
Okay.
of time.
Do you
So we
think,
can have
where
that
are
ready
you
for
guys
you.
at with time? Do you think that you could have these back to Marianne probably late in the day Monday? So she can pull a report together for our Tuesday meeting? to see
I
the
think
scores?
so.
Okay,
Especially since we've eliminated quite a few.
right. We
Maybe
have
sooner.
pared down the workload by a significant amount, so.
Do we have could you send us an email, Marianne, or whoever, about the city's comprehensive plan and strategic goals so we
Sure.
know what to compare to?
Yep.
Okay.
And also, like you did with the CIP scoring, if you could email a copy of the spreadsheet,
Oh, yeah,
I'd like that, so I don't have
okay,
to
so you can fill the boxes
Fill it in without-
fill in the boxes, yeah.
So
Okay,
I'll fill mine in the old-fashioned way and erase them and change them 3 times and then send you my final.
all right.
So, okay, so with that, do we have any other objectives that we have to meet tonight for this session? Since we've
Not
ground
that
our way,
I'm aware
ground
of.
our way through all the supplements
Nice job.
in just over 2 hours, so we're cooking along, committee.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt. Is there anything that we want to talk about tomorrow night?
So,
We've gotten through all of my, I guess, goals of presentation-wise on the budget.
yes, do we have, are we still waiting on numbers for the fluid numbers, like our equalized value,
Yes.
health insurance? I mean, we have a
Well,
guess,
health
but we don't
insurance
have.
is in. We are still waiting on values. We're still waiting on the levies from the other taxing jurisdictions.
Okay,
And we're waiting on one grant amount, our municipal service aid revenue.
okay. Because if we have that much fluidity still, and we have to do the scoring before we can get much further, would it be prudent for us to cancel tomorrow night's meeting, hold Tuesday night's meeting, which is where we'll have our rankings determined, and then if we still need a 4th session, we could set it for towards the end of next week and give you some more time to
Sure.
gather all this stuff from the other taxing entities? What do you guys think?
There was an addendum on the
Yeah.
agenda. Could that hold until Tuesday?
Yeah, so as we kind of mentioned at the meeting, Greg had asked if he could do a budget amendment for, the state of Wisconsin is requesting that, or demanding basically, that he upgraded his fuel system. It's about $20,000. He was going to take it out of his capital reserve fund. And he has Northwest Petroleum, who would do the work still this year. So we could take it to finance on the 26th, and it could go directly to
Council
council
the
that
same
same
night?
night.
Yeah.
If you felt comfortable, like I said, he's taking it out of his capital reserves, and his fueling system is currently out of compliance, and so basically they would, I think,
So he has
lock
no
his
choice,
system.
basically.
Right. I mean, it's gotten
So-
to the point where it needs to be done.
Okay, so are you guys okay with taking it Tuesday night and then right to council? And if
On
the
the
mayor
26th.
and/or Becky is okay with suspending the 5-day information rule, they can do a rule suspension at council, and we'll take it
Okay,
right from the committee.
okay.
Okay, so with
sure
that,
no
then
one
we'll be
can.
able to cancel tomorrow night's workshop, because we've got so much done tonight.
Yay.
So yay, and then we'll reconvene here Tuesday and work out some more of these numbers.
Okay.
And if we find that we still need that session number 4, we'll look toward the end of next week,
Okay.
if that would
That
work
makes
for
sense.
everyone. Okay, with that, we don't have anything else on our agenda.
move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn from Watson. Is there a second? Second from Martins. Everyone's hands fly up.
Thank you very much,
Members
everybody,
in
for
favor signify by saying
sticking
aye.
with us.
Aye, opposed? No one ever is. We'll
Very
stand adjourned.
organized.
Thanks, everyone.